Wow, the game of real estate has just changed forever. In this video, I'm going to break down the full National Association of Realtors commission settlement. This is a huge game changer for the industry, and it's a really bad type of change for one type of person, and a really good kind of change for another. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly whom that person is, and it might not be whom you're hoping it to be. Anyway, here's first a background on how commission structures usually work. This is actually really important to understand. Where do companies like Zillow and Redfin come in, and how does it compare to, what is normal? And then how does today's ruling change everything? Well, let's talk about that. So America has a very unique system. It's a system we haven't really seen anywhere else in the world, and it's one essentially where when a listing agent goes to a seller of a house, the listing agent, which keep in mind I've been a broker for over 11 years or a real estate agent for over 13 years. Broker just means I can employ agents, in case you're not familiar with that. And then of course we can join the MLS. We'll talk about that in just a moment. That's how you become a realtor. Realtor is different from agent. Agent is state licensed, realtor is membership. So when you hear the phrase realtor, just think member of the multiple listing service, the MLS. All right, seller. So ordinarily when I go to a seller, I would say, all right, what we're going to do, the seller will say, what are the fees? Well, your seller fees are usually going to be 1 to 1.25%. And those are going to be things for escrow, title insurance, maybe a home warranty plan if we decide to offer it. Then we're going to have the listing side commission. That's usually 2.5% in my market. In some markets, that's 2%. In some markets, that's 3%. Usually you see higher percentages when the prices of properties are lower. And so if you go luxury, like $2 million properties, you usually see a 2% listing commission. But these are all negotiable, right? So 2.5% to the listing agent. And we would usually offer 2.5% to the buyer's agent. That's the person representing the buyer. And then what we would say is, hey, if I happen to represent you as the seller and the buyer, which is allowed in most states in the country, though in some areas it's not allowed, we would offer a minus 1% discount to that. So the total commission would be 4 instead of 5%. This has been traditionally the structure we would use. Of course, another seller fee would be any kind of repair costs that the seller has during escrow for credits or whatever it might be. So usually we would see fees between 6 and 6.25%. Of that, 5% would be commissions. Now, what's happened is you've had companies like, let's say, Redfin come in, and these are what we generally in the industry call the discount agents. They'll come in and say, you know what, we will list your property for 1%. And then we'll still give 2.5% to the buyer's agent because we don't want to discourage buyers. So we're going to sell your property for that 3.5 total as opposed to 5, total, right? 2.5 outside the escrow title number. So that's an example of how discount agents would try to compete. They would lower the fee they charge. Lowering the fee you charge is actually going to be a critical component of this settlement, and you'll see exactly why in a moment. Now, keep in mind that oftentimes, and I don't want this to be a video bagging on discount agents, most full-service agents will bag on discount agents saying, well, they do discount work. Discount agents respond and go, no, we just do the same work at a lower fee, right? Of course, everybody's got their pitch and their shtick. Okay, fine. So what does this mean? Well, right now, this settlement has said instead of the seller offering 2.5% to that buy side and whatever it is to the listing side, we're going to remove the obligation of the seller to offer anything to that buy side. That has just disappeared, which means if I'm a normal listing agent now, I can go to a seller and say, hey, you no longer have to pay 6 to 6.25% for realtors escrow and title. Instead, we're going to go with, let's just call it, to be a little more competitive, let's just call it 1% for escrow and title, right? And then we're going to add 2.5% to list it. We'll do 3.5% total to sell your house, obviously minus whatever repairs get agreed to during the transaction. Now, the seller might say, but who pays the buyer's agent then? Because traditionally, the seller always paid the buyer's agent. And that has now flip-flopped to where the seller can say, we aren't going to offer the buyer's agent anymore any money. I don't care who pays for the buyer's agent, but it ain't gonna be me. So who's going to have to pay for that? Well, the buyer's going to have to pay for that. Now, you might think, wait a minute, if the seller can sell the property for lower fees, that might mean sales prices might come down, right? Well, let's think about this for a moment. So let's simplify this. And let's say the old guard for a seller was 5% plus escrow title repairs, right? Now, the new is, as a listing agent, I could tell the seller it's only 2.5%. Well, that makes me much more competitive as an agent, right? If I could say, hey, it's actually much cheaper to use me now, I'm able to lock in my fee a lot easier because I'm not also advocating for the buyer's agent anymore. So I actually think, and this is an important part right here, a lot of people are like, Kevin, is this actually going to change anything? Yes, I actually think listing agents are very quickly going to adopt to this change. And they're going to say, you know what? We're just going to offer 0 to the buyer's agent because it makes me more competitive in that listing appointment. Remember, if you're not in the industry, that might seem confusing. An agent who goes to a seller is competing to get that contract signed. Well, if you can compete to get that contract signed by burning the other buyer's agents because now you could do that, well, why wouldn't you? Well, maybe you like your buyer's agents, friend, that's true, but in a capitalistic world, the buyer's agents are going to get burned. The seller's agents are going to cut them out. That way they can increase the odds of them getting the listing because the seller really only cares about one thing. That's the house gets sold for the maximum possible net. And if your net sheet shows that they get a bigger number, you're more likely to get the listing. So again, listing agents are probably going to start advocating en masse, we don't have to offer the buyer's commission anymore. Now that's where the change is. In the past, if you took a listing commission and you put a property in the MLS, you had to offer a buyer's agent commission. Now, that buyer's agent commission could be as low as $1, but because everybody in the area would generally offer 2%, 2.5%, or 3%, well, everybody basically stuck to that. So people didn't really have to offer 2.5%. They just had to offer something. And because they had to offer something and it was normal for everybody to offer 2.5% in my area, let's say, again, it could be 2 or 3 somewhere else, people would do that. In fact, what people used to do, old school, this is gonna blow your mind. Listing agents had to sell the seller on doing this. So the listing agent would say, give me 2.5%, but it's such a hard market, like 2011 or whatever, let's offer the buyer's agent 3%. That's called a buyer's agent incentive. And it's basically trying to convince a buyer's agent to go, please bring more clients to this property, you will make more money. Now, I know it shouldn't be that way, right? It should be best house for the best buyer and matching fits like that. But this is capitalism. That's not how it works. We could debate the merits about being an agent or whatever in a different video. I'm just explaining what's likely to happen here is the listing agents are going to completely remove themselves from the need to offer a buyer's commission at all. Okay, so now we have that bottom line secured. Listing agents are going to make themselves more competitive. They're going to make themselves more competitive by lowering the total fees that they have to negotiate for by cutting out the buyer's agent, which makes the seller look like they're getting a bigger net. As soon as some agents start doing that in a neighborhood, it is going to spread faster than the first wave of COVID because the agents advocating for the buyer's agent aren't going to get listings anymore. And they're going to go, dang it, I have to change my practices. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, nobody's offering buyer's agents commissions anymore. All right, bottom line secured. Buyer's agents aren't getting commissions anymore. What does that mean for buyers and home prices? And who's the big winner and loser in all of this, right? Well, let's analyze that. Okay, so if buyers now have to pay the buyer's commission, what's going to happen is buyers are going to do one of two things. Buyers are going to, well, first of all, on the listing side, you're still gonna have that 2.5% for the listing side. So the listing agent's still gonna get their money. They used to get the 2.5% anyway, right? So that part doesn't really change. It doesn't really affect the seller's agent. So listing agents are pretty insulated here. But buyer's agents used to basically rely on the listing agent's negotiation for their commission. Well, now nobody's advocating for their 2.5 anymore. So that buyer's agent is going to have to convince buyers themselves to pay for that 2.5%. This is done through something known as a buyer's broker. A buyer's broker is kind of like a contract that a buyer enters into with their realtor, and the buyer promises to pay their agent 2.5%. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking to myself, there's no way in hell I'm going to do that. Well, who is most likely to need a buyer's agent most? Well, frankly, it's first-time home buyers, or new investors. People who don't know anything about title insurance, home inspections, electrical panels, sewer, city permit requirements, city inspection requirements, zoning, flood insurance, best insurance agent, best vendors in the area. People who don't know these things, whether it's crime rates or which areas have had the rebar taken out of it by the builder in a fraudulent manner and half of the neighborhood sucks and the other half doesn't because one half is basically having their foundations crumble away. Who's going to tell a buyer that? Well, it's not going to be the seller, so the buyer has to hire their own representation. Now, there are two types of representation you can hire. You could hire a consultant, or you could hire a real estate agent that is paid on a commission of you actually getting like a deal closed. So when an agent gets a commission, they're motivated to help you get the deal closed. They're motivated to make sure that you fully understand what you're getting into and that problems get resolved. Every single real estate transaction has problems, and it's usually between the seller's agent rather, and the buyer's agent in terms of how problems are solved. Buyers and sellers directly together, like if we just did blockchain real estate, it probably wouldn't work. Mostly because you could blockchain title insurance and certain like fees. Title insurance is going to go to blockchain, that for sure. But the actual emotional transaction of real estate is extremely difficult because there's so much involved and people are extremely emotional in real estate and there's so much that people are just unaware of that it's actually a very hard transaction. People bag on real estate agents all the time because they say, well, when I bought my house, it was easy. That's the norm. After a deal closes and it's an easy deal, agents are usually like, did that just happen? Like usually deals aren't easy. Now again, I'm not here to advocate for you having an agent or not. I'm just saying a commissioned agent is really motivated to get the deal done because they don't get paid until they close the deal. A consultant might charge a buyer hourly. Now, again, I don't care which one you choose. Obviously, hourly, if you look at 10 homes, you're gonna pay a lot more money than if you look at one home. Maybe that's the fair model. Maybe that's the future, right? But who ultimately gets screwed by this? And do home prices come down? Well, let's analyze this, okay? So the listing agent is still making their 2.5%. So we know it's not the listing agent that's getting screwed. At least before we talk about home price, let's ask ourselves, is the seller getting screwed by paying lower fees? No, of course not. Again, we're gonna talk prices in a moment, but it's not the listing agent who gets screwed, and it's certainly not the buyer, or certainly not the seller who gets screwed, again, on a fees point of view. Then you've got buyers and buyers' agents. Well, do buyers' agents get screwed? In part, yes, because now buyers' agents need to prove their value up front and actually convince a buyer to marry their basically real estate agent. And no matter what property they buy, they have to use that agent. Now that's the right thing to do anyway, so maybe that's not that big of a deal. So I'm gonna say this is about maybe a half loss for the buyer's agent. So let's say half of the pain is carried by the buyer's agent, okay? Who carries the other half? The buyers. Absolutely, the buyers get screwed here. What kind of buyers get screwed? Well, let me ask you this. I run a real estate startup. I've been doing this again for like 11 years as a broker, over 13 years as an agent, property manager. Am I gonna get screwed? So if I have my real estate startup and we're buying real estate, which by the way, you can invest in it if you wanted to. It's househack.com/2024. We're also creating ways to make it so that you could 1031 into a public security that you could just swipe up on Robinhood and sell. So you defer taxes up to that point, which is pretty incredible. You can learn more about that by emailing us at ir@househack.com. But anyway, let me ask you this. somebody who's sophisticated, who has their own real estate license, are they going to get screwed? No. Somebody who has their own real estate license, who knows how to play the game, who knows what they're doing, who's a sophisticated investor, who's done this many times before, they're not going to get screwed. Look, for example, househack, by the way, I just licensed my real estate startup. So like here it is, househack. Here's our license ID number, status, license. So we are going to be just fine. And any investor who knows what they're doing is going to be just fine. In fact, if we want to go buy real estate, what do? We just pick up the phone and call the listing agent, and we can write paperwork ourselves. We don't even have to charge ourselves. But that's very unique. We're a buyer that's licensed and is a member of the Realtor Association. We're not going to get screwed. Who gets screwed? Well, it's not this kind of buyer. It's the first-time home buyer. It's the first-time home buyer and the non-licensed brand new investor who's trying to get started. They're the ones who get screwed. Now, why do they get screwed? Because Kevin, they could still have an agent. They could pay for the agent themselves. Really? Okay, let's think about that for a moment. Most buyers, when they get started, they put down 3.5% to 5%. That's their down payment. Let's assume they're going to put down 5%. Now, a buyer's agent says, by the way, I'm so glad you just came up with $25,000 to put 5% down on your $500,000 house, but we're now going to need you to come up with another 50% of your down payment or $12,500 so that I can help you buy this home. Buyers and first-time investors are usually cash strapped. You just shifted a massive burden to the buyer's agent's buyers. Okay, so the buyers get screwed here because they have to come up with the cash. Now, wait a second. They're already cash strapped because they're financing most of the deal. The homeowners are selling most of the time with equity. And if they're not financing their sale with equity and paying their fees with equity, they're going to a bank and short selling. And then the bank is paying the fees. So shifting this to buyers with low down payments really sucks. So then you might say, okay, Kevin, but why don't they just ask for a credit back? So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and say the house price is going to be $512,500, and the buyer is going to ask for a credit back of $12,500. Now, as long as the property appraises for $512,500, we can give the buyer a credit back for $12,500, which can then go to pay the buyer's agent. That's great. But what did you just kill? You just killed the fact that most buyers are limited to 3% in credits or the down payment, right? That's usually where you're limited. Unless you're VA, then you can get like 3% with zero down. It's kind of crazy. But anyway, if you now blew that potential to get a credit on a commission, you're not able to use that credit to finance upgrades on the home. Like, oh no, the panel's broken. Let's replace the panel or the sewer or whatever. You're now limiting credits that buyers can get because lenders put a max on the amount of credits you can get when a buyer finances a home, which most buyers, especially first-time home buyers and investors, obviously, they finance their homes. Who doesn't finance homes? Cash buyers. Cash buyers, sophisticated investors, investors who have their licenses. They don't care about this. This doesn't matter. These are sophisticated people who could just call the listing agent and have faith that the agent's maybe not going to do much for them anyway, and they'll just represent themselves like a big boy or big girl. Okay, well, again, that's great for sophisticated people, but who does it screw? Home buyers and early investors, and then of course in part buyers agents. So I think and then we're going to talk prices in just a moment. Who benefits here? Sellers, listing agents. Who's hurt? Buyers and buyers agents. If you're going to be a real estate agent, you want to be really, really successful in the long term, you probably got to focus solely on listings. Now, that's not to say if there's a buyer who really wants to work with you, they won't pay you your fee. That will happen. It's going to be a lot harder to negotiate that, especially amongst cash-strapped buyers. Maybe you'll open up a whole new breed of consultants. I don't know about that. Now, we got to talk home prices with a quick note about the MLS. Some people are suggesting this is the death of the MLS. No. Being a member of the MLS is critical. My real estate startup, we're a member of almost all of the MLSs that we work in. We do that on purpose so we could get the best data and we could get the California Association of Realtors legal contracts, or if we're buying in Utah, we could get the Utah legal contracts, whatever. Wherever we're buying, we could use the standard forms and some of the best contracts that exist. The California Association of Realtors, as an example, they're really good. They have some of the best paperwork that exists, and you want to be a realtor to be able to use those forms, and you want the best data available on the MLS. Is it possible that that best data is going to end up at, places like Zillow? Maybe. Probably not in the near term, because I don't think this ruling changes anything for people being part of the MLS or not. What this changes is buyers and buyers agents. That's it. That's where the problem is. What about prices? Some people say, well, if a seller can now save 2.5% or 2% or 3% on the value of their home, will they sell their home for less? No. I do not think that home prices are going to go down as a result of this. I understand it seems logical that if a seller can sell their home for less because they have lower fees, that prices might come down, and maybe buyer purchasing power will fall a little bit because now they have to pay for all of these fees, or maybe they don't, right? That's not how the market works, though. The real estate market is based on sales comparisons. If 10 homes in the last 6 months in one neighborhood sold for 500 grand, just because fees just went away, doesn't mean the seller is not also going to expect $500,000. And the appraisers probably aren't going to look at that as well. So I don't actually see home ownership getting more affordable as a result of this. I actually think what you did is you just made, and I'm not saying this ruling shouldn't have happened. I'm not anti the ruling. Like, let's be real. The reason the California Association of Realtors and the National Association of Realtors and different realtor associations throughout the country advocated for a buyer's agent commission was actually to help buyers get into deals, to make it so that, look, here's an agent for you. You don't even have to pay for them. We already got that handled for you. I understand why courts are like, yeah, well, we can't mandate that. I totally get it. But you just effed first-time home buyers and homeowners who are moving and early investors. I'm convinced by that. You just made those transactions a lot harder. Now, I want to give some respect here to some public comments that I saw. So let's take a look at some of these public comments. Here somebody says, I have 40 years of experience at practicing real estate as an attorney. It seems to me that most of these comments on Reddit are made by people who do not know what's involved in the sale and purchase of a home. Having worked with many real estate agents and brokers, I could say most of them, not all, like all other industries, there are a small percentage of people who give everyone a bad name, are very hardworking individuals. In order to make a living as an agent, you're working 24/7, 365. The phone rings, you answer it, whether it's at 11 p.m. or whatever. Yes, in a seller's market, being a listing agent is relatively easy, but representing a buyer is very difficult. When houses sell fast, buyers need help getting their offer put together and presented as fast as possible, or they will not have a chance at getting their contract signed. This is true. You gotta be fast. And you need to know how to talk to the listing agent, and you need to know the questions to ask, and you need to know how to present the offer, and you need to know how to follow up. It is a job to get an offer accepted. It's really, really hard. Okay? But anyway, when houses, okay, we talked about that. Likewise, when it's a buyer's market, a knowledgeable listing agent can be invaluable in getting your home sold. There's so much more involved than what's seen on HGTV. That's true. That's a nice one about agents. Okay, what over here? When I bought my first home, I was a very, very busy woman. I worked with a realtor who presented well, and I liked her, but I expected her to do the work of finding me the right home. I was too busy, and I knew that she stood to receive thousands of dollars once I purchased. I expected her to work for that money, and she didn't. When I was considering a condo, I wanted her to get a hold of the info for the homeowners association and research how healthy the HOA was financially and what plans there were, and she just didn't do it. Another time, basically, an agent tried to sell her home cheap and it sold with multiple offers, blah, blah, blah. This is very common. You get these sort of feelings very frequently from buyers who are like, I'm paying you. And even though the seller was paying them, I'm paying you. Therefore, you better find my home for me or whatever. Like you do get that kind of attitude. And I understand where that expectation comes from. It used to be in like the 80s that buyer's agents would be like, hey, let's go look at these 5 homes. I think these have your name on it. Well, now with the internet, it's actually much easier for people to spend 5 minutes a day and go, any homes come up in my neighborhood? And then where the buyer's agent really comes in isn't necessarily finding the home unless it's off market. It's negotiating the deal, presenting the offer, winning the offer, and then of course closing the deal. That's mostly where I would say most of the buyer's agent pay comes in now. Again, actually winning the contract, not so much finding the home or unlocking the door. Some people do say that. They're like, oh, they're overpaid door unlockers. Costs just got significantly less for the iBuyers and private equity behemoths. Good luck, USA. Get your rent checks ready for Blackstone. This will have no impact on pricing. Yep. I think this person literally just nailed it. Costs did just get significantly lower for big companies, and they're right. iBuyers, basically companies who are flipping like an open door, costs just got a lot cheaper for them because they don't have to offer that buyer's agent commission anymore, which gives them potentially more of a spread. But they're able to get less of a spread up front. Remember, when Open Door goes and buys a home, they're like, hey, we're only going to charge you, whatever our fee is versus what you would be paying realtors. Well, they're going to pay for that fee up front. So I actually don't think the iBuyers win as much as people think. Really, again, it's sellers who win. Sellers are going to be able to demand more dalahalas for their properties. Somebody here says, feels like a mixed blessing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there's a lot of commentary around this. Somebody here is talking about, oh, the Association of Realtors sets a code of ethics, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so very bottom line out of all of this. What would I do if I'm an investor? Well, I just have my own license and write my own forms, but that's what I do. And that's what I do at my real estate startup. What would I do if I'm an investor or wanting to become an investor? Well, the first thing that I would do is I would make sure to sign up for my event on June 21st to June 23rd in Vegas. We are going to hold a 3-day event where we talk finance, innovation, and a lot of real estate. I'm going to teach you how to go from zero to millionaire in real estate and actually how to compete in this day and age, how to get your offers accepted, how to manage real estate, how to actually find a good deal. We're going to go through all of that. And we've got other speakers coming as well for different parts of the event. So stay tuned. Go to meetkevin.com to sign up. Get your ticket now. The prices will be going up over time. Now, what about if you're not going to go run out and get your license and you're just a home buyer? Well, if you want the best representation possible, you have two potential choices. You could find the best possible real estate agent that maybe you've used before, and you're just going to have to sign the buyer's broker. Maybe they'll sell your home too if you're moving up. That's the way it is. Alternatively, you could try to negotiate a consulting agreement where, hey, you're going to end up saying, I'm going to work with the listing agent, but I want to run the deal by you and maybe ask somebody to come look at it. Can I pay you a few $1,000s and that'll buy me, maybe 3 phone calls for advice and a visit to the property, whatever it is, right? Maybe that's too much, okay? Maybe that's 10 phone calls, right, and visit the property. I don't know. Whatever it is, I'd probably think about that, especially if I'm a first-time home buyer. As a first-time home buyer, I think you really got reamed here. I really, really feel bad for first-time home buyers because first-time home buyers are going to be like, I don't have any more money for all of these fees. What the hell? And so now with mortgage rates at 7% and it's being hard to save up for a down payment, now you have to pay even more just to get representation, whereas the listing agent has representation built in. That sucks. So really do feel bad for those first-time home buyers. And I'll probably just try to hold more of these events or put more content out on YouTube to really help first-time homebuyers because I do think that buying real estate is the greatest and fastest way to real wealth, and it's non-speculative. That's my opinion. But and I'm not looking for clients, right? I've got a big client that's called Househack. It's my baby, and that's all I focus on. But as far as first-time homebuyers, I'm sorry.